We're going to look at 8 problems intermediate guitar players have. If you don't know who I am, my name is Brandon Dion. I'm the founder of 52 Week Guitar Player, established in 2019. The problems we'll be covering in this video go as follows. 1. Not knowing what to practice. 2. You ask questions that you would have the answers to if you just did the thing you're asking about. 3. Inability to make your solos sound interesting. 4. Continuing to play the same shit over and over. 5. Struggling to memorize scales comfortably. 6. A fear of theory. 7. Lack of consistency. And 8 is getting lost when you improvise. Let's get started. The most common problem I see with intermediate guitar players is not knowing what to practice. Why does this problem exist? Well, let's think about it. Right now, you're watching a guitar video on the internet, and this probably isn't the first guitar video you've ever watched. I imagine you've watched a ton of guitar videos in your life already. And because there's so much information out there, you get option paralysis, which is just a fancy way of saying because there's so many things that you could practice, you end up just not practicing anything. It's kind of like going to a restaurant where they have a giant menu, so it takes you forever to decide what you want. Then you start to feel insecure because everyone else has already made their decision and you're holding up the entire operation. Then you just default to what you always order because you got stressed the fuck out. You will get no sympathy from Brandon. And because there's so much information out there, but so little structure, you don't know what to practice, so you just default to what you already know and don't really improve. Imagine what life was like before the internet. You couldn't just sit down and watch a high quality educational guitar video whenever the fuck you wanted for free. If you found a video from today, like 30 years ago, then you would zero in on that one video and practice everything that it taught because you wouldn't be distracted by like 50 other fucking things. You would go deep on that one video instead of looking at 50 videos and just scratching the surface. You'd be less confused about what to practice because you would just practice the things that that video taught. You would no longer be suffering from option paralysis. Not knowing what to practice is a common problem. Fortunately for you, I just told you how to fix it. Go deep on the content from one video for a while. I recently put out some amazing ones on my channel here. I encourage you to get clear on what your goals are. I also encourage you to be more intentional with your time. Getting better at guitar really isn't that hard. You're just distracted. Problem 2. You ask questions that you would have the answers to if you just did the thing that you're asking about. Here's some common questions every intermediate guitar player asks. Should I learn the cage system? Should I memorize triads? Should I learn the modes? Why are you asking these questions? It's because you have a limited amount of practice time and you're trying to figure out whether or not it's worth it. But you know what I think? Anytime you find yourself asking a question like this, if you just learned the thing you're asking about, you could then make your own judgment to determine whether or not it was worth it. Because let's think for a second. What's actually holding you back from learning something? Fear? Are you intimidated by the circle of fifths? What if you don't understand it? Doesn't that sound ridiculous? All you have to lose by trying to learn something is time. But you'll likely play guitar for your entire life. So if something takes a bit longer to learn than what you're used to, who cares? At least now you'll have the knowledge and you can know for certain whether or not it was worth your time, which is probably pretty worthless anyway. So change your mindset. If you're concerned about losing your precious time that you would probably waste anyway by playing video games or watching Netflix, you can always pay a teacher to help you learn these things faster. And yes, you probably could figure it out on your own, but we pay for speed. Consider enrolling in 52 Week Guitar Player to get that speed. Problem 3. As an intermediate level guitar player, you struggle to make your solos sound interesting. I was having a conversation with one of my students the other day, and he asked me how to make his solos sound more interesting. As someone with an intermediate skill set, you have 2 options. Option 1 is to continue getting better, which is something that I imagine you're already actively working on. Understand that growth comes with consistent practice over time, and your time will come. Option 2. Make the most of what you've got. When it comes to your soloing skills, I imagine you know the pentatonic scale. You probably know the other pentatonic shapes as well, but you aren't super comfortable with them. You probably know the major scale and have at least heard of the modes. Whatever your background is, what makes a solo super interesting is not just the notes you play, it's the emotion that you play with. Even with a limited skill set, playing the pentatonic scale with tons of emotion is all it takes to win the crowd over. This alone will make your solos sound more interesting. The problem is that you're sick of the pentatonic scale and you can't even get into your own solos because you know you've played all this shit before and you feel like you suck. You're bored of your own playing. Something that helps me solve problems like this is adding one new thing to my solos that I'm actively practicing. Example, if you know the main pentatonic box, but you aren't quite as comfortable with the neighboring shapes, pick one to practice and then start mixing that in with the pentatonic box shape that you're already comfortable with. This way you'll be adding something new and exciting to your solos, but you can still sound confident. You're welcome! Problem 4. Continuing to play the same shit over and over. Let me tell you the difference between how noobs practice versus how pros practice. Noobs and intermediate guitar players jump around from thing to thing too quickly. Pros will practice the same thing for months. This happens because newer players are bombarded with information from the internet and tutorial videos and don't know how to organize the information into a way that will help them achieve their individual goals. All of this content is good on its own, but by consuming too much of it, they distract themselves. They don't go deep with one specific topic. They go wide with too many topics. A professional understands that you have to sleep on information. And in order to successfully integrate something they're practicing into their actual playing, it takes time and reps. Take knowing the notes on the fretboard, for example. Generally, both intermediate players and professionals both know the notes of the fretboard. So what's the difference? The difference is how well they know the notes. An intermediate guitar player would have to take a minute to figure out where the notes are, whereas a pro would be able to find the notes in 1 second or less. This is because the pro went deep with learning the notes on the fretboard versus the intermediate guitar player who just learned where they were once and stopped. This is actually another reason why intermediate guitar players play the same shit in their solos for years. Since they don't know the fretboard well enough to target chord tones, they just default to playing the same pentatonic shapes that their fingers already know. In order to stop playing the same shit, one must learn new shit. It really is that simple. It's just that you never learn new shit, so you just rely on what you already know. So I recommend that you stop playing video games and get off the cigarettes so you can have more time for guitar. When you're 80 years old, you're not gonna wish you played more video games. Problem 5 is struggling to comfortably memorize scales. Intermediate guitar players always struggle to memorize scales. In fact, a lot of them hate scales. But if you aren't a fucking dumbass and can actually appreciate scales, but you're still struggling to memorize them to the point where you can create musical sounding solos with them effortlessly, let me educate you. The short answer to this problem is more reps. Got it? If you don't have the scales memorized, play them 1,000 times and report back. Write in the comment section below. It took me X amount of time to play the blank scale 1,000 times. Could be major, could be pentatonic, could be Phrygian dominant, whatever. Now, you do actually get some sympathy from me if you've done that and still haven't mastered them. Because for one, 1,000 probably still isn't enough reps. But two, and this is more important, you've got to get creative. Play the scales in different ways. Don't just practice them like this. I know you've never thought of this, but try using what little creativity you have to practice in different ways. Who says you have to practice starting with the root on the E string? Maybe you practice starting on the third on the G string. What about string skipping? What about different intervals? Do whatever it takes to challenge yourself, because by doing this, you'll be able to clearly visualize the scale before you actually play it. And you must get to that point to feel comfortable soloing with it. No exceptions. You know how you can see the pentatonic scale very clearly before you play it? Get whatever scale you're working on to that point. And this is how you solve the problem of scale memorization. Problem 6. Fear of theory. Why are guitar players so scared of theory? It's fucking stupid. You're stupid. Stop being afraid to use your brain. It's what separates us from monkeys, you Neanderthal fuck. This is really a time thing. You're concerned about the long road ahead of you should you choose to learn music theory. This is something I remind you guys constantly, but you're gonna play guitar for your whole life. What does it matter if it takes you 1 year to properly learn music theory? Would you rather go the rest of your life without knowing it? I guess it depends on what your goals are, but if you made it this far into a video that discusses problems you have as an intermediate level guitar player, you're probably more interested in guitar than you realize. Also, here's what's great about music theory. Are you ready? You only have to learn theory once. Once you learn it, you now know it for the rest of your life, and it's done. Assuming you don't forget everything. But if you think about something else, maintaining your chops requires a consistent effort that never ends. If you don't practice your speed and dexterity, it'll fade over time. With theory, sure you can forget shit, but it's much easier to relearn versus trying to get back to a tempo that was really fast that you used to play at, but you can't play at anymore because you didn't practice, and you lost your speed. Theory is way more forgiving. And if you're concerned about it taking too much time to learn music theory, again, again, consider enrolling in 52-week Guitar Player. Or you can just get another teacher, whatever. Bottom line, you're buying time back by learning from a professional. And 52-week Guitar Player is better than one-on-one lessons, by the way, but more on that later. Anyway, that's my take on learning theory. It's better to spend the rest of your life knowing it instead of not knowing it. Problem 7, lack of consistency. I know some of you don't want to hear this, but if you don't practice consistently, you're always going to have problems. I know some of you sons of bitches out there like to disagree with my points because it gives you an ego boost, but this is one of those things that even you can agree with me on. Think about all the things that will go wrong if you don't practice consistently. Your woman will leave you, your kids won't respect you, your parents will be ashamed of you, you'll get fired from your job, you'll go into debt, you'll lose possession of your assets, you'll develop a drug problem, you'll end up homeless, and you will die. Also, your guitar playing will suffer. So moral of the story, practice consistently. A lot of your stupid questions will be answered by practicing. You're stupid! Or instead, you can just watch gear reviews for your entire life. Problem 8, getting lost when you improvise. Getting lost in a chord progression when you're soloing sucks. This problem can really happen to any guitar player regardless of what skill level you play at. So how do we solve this problem? Here's the answer. If you're getting lost when you improvise, it's simply because you don't know what you're playing over well enough. Think about your absolute favorite songs of all time. One of those songs that you can sing all the words to, or you can hum the guitar solo if there is one. You know that song perfectly. You could turn that song on, leave the room, come back, and immediately be able to tell where you are. When you know the chord progression you're soloing over just as well as you know your favorite song, you will never get lost. This may seem difficult, but I promise it's not. Even if the backing track has a chord progression that looks like this. Usually it only takes a minute or less for the entire chord progression to play through. So all you have to do is get comfortable with 1 minute of music, really, because then it just loops. I also encourage you to use your ears to pay close attention to where you are in the chart. Try putting the track on, leaving the room for a minute or two, then come back and try to find where you are in the chart. This will help. If you'd like to talk more about your guitar problems to a professional, consider enrolling in 52-week Guitar Player. 52-week Guitar Player is a guitar program that I created in 2019. In this program, you will receive structure, practice routines, feedback, accountability, live interaction with pros, and big fun in the sun. Unlike every other guitar course on the internet, 52-week Guitar Player is personalized. We still have an organized lesson curriculum to solve your problem of having no structure. But as you go through it and do the practice routines, you will receive personalized feedback in video form from a professional. This is guaranteed in 52-week Guitar Player. And after 2.5 months of being closed, 52-week Guitar Player has once again opened up for enrollment, and we will stay open until June 30th or until 100 new students sign up, whichever comes first. If you're watching this video after June of 2024, grab your spot on the waiting list. The link will be in the description. You could always join now while we still have spots available and are still open, and then just refund if you didn't like it. But I'm confident that you'll love it once you enroll. Just check out what these students had to say. The link to join will be in the description for as long as we're open. Then once we close again, I'll be replacing it with a link to join the waiting list. I have nothing left to say. Now just leave!